So as it turns out, this year, when Rachel's birthday rolled around, I'm the one who wound up getting the gift. Because what she wanted to do this year for her birthday was to pack up the truck with me, load all the camping gear in, and take a rough week-long camping trip up around the Pacific Northwest to kind of recreate the trip we did the first time we went around the Olympic Peninsula. So that's exactly what we did. We packed up, we headed north, and come on along, I'll show you what we did while we took our Rachel's epic birthday trip around the Olympic Peninsula. So what Rachel and I have found is these trips to the Pacific Northwest kind of have the same elements to them. On the first night, we just bug out of Salt Lake and we get as far as we can get. In this case, we got up to above Idaho Falls, kind of on the border of Idaho Falls and Montana. Pretty uneventful night there. And then the next day, we crossed through Montana on the edge of it a little bit, up by Butte and over through eastern Washington. Well, eastern Washington's not the most scenic country in the world, so as we're driving across there, Rachel decided to start introducing me to one of these kind of scary, creepy ghost story podcasts that she starts listening to. So we listened to that all as we're driving across Washington. And then that night, as we were trying to find a camp spot, the first campgrounds we found were just packed full of people. But on the map, there were these little federal campsites at the end of this road that we're now, in the video here, we're coming out of that road. But you can see how overgrown the forest is there. And as we were coming into that thing at night, we didn't really know if there was going to be a campground at the end. We didn't have any idea how far we had to go. It seemed like it took hours to get up there. And you can see how the forest is thick and hanging over the road. Well, in the nighttime, when your headlights are shining on that, it just looks like you're driving through a little tunnel. And I think we both fully expected to find an axe murderer at the end of that road, especially after listening to all those podcasts we listened to. But as it turned out, we found a great camp spot, set up for the night, had a good night's rest, and got up in the morning and tried out our new scrambled eggs process, and it worked out quite well. Had a good breakfast and got ourselves back on the road. So our next stop was the ferry at Anacortes, and we made it there luckily just in time to get on the earlier ferry. We were scheduled on a later one in the day, but we were one of the, right at the cutoff point. So as you can see, as we pull onto the thing, we're pretty much one of the very last vehicles. But we got on the ferry with no issues and headed our way over to Friday Harbor. For me, driving the truck onto a ferry as part of one of the road trips is just one of the most amazing things that you can ever do, I think. You got all your stuff in the truck and you're ready to camp and travel and you're fully self-contained, and then you just drive that whole thing onto a boat and go out on the ocean. So this is how we went to Alaska before. This is what drew us kind of back up to that country, and I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of going on a ferry. I told Rachel, when I get old one day, if I've gone missing, make sure to just check the ferry lines up to Alaska, because I may just be riding a ferry up to the end of the world up there. So anyway, it's about, I think, an hour and a half or so taking the ferry over to Friday Harbor. And like I said, it was just a perfect day. The water was calm as could be, and it was a pretty great ferry ride. Everybody was wearing masks and doing their social distancing, so it's a little different than how it was before. There's no, you can't buy any food or anything on the boat, but had a great trip over there. And just looking back towards Anacortes in the background here, you can see we were making good time and everything was going pretty smooth. So one of the things I did notice as we were going across the ferry ride here was I looked out at one point and there was about a 38 or 40 foot trawler kind of cruising along, just working his way back to the direction we had just came. And it sure made me want to be in that position. I mean, being on a ferry is fine, but it sure is my dream to be the guy on the boat looking over at the ferry, going on my own schedule and staying until I'm done up in that country. So one of these days that's going to be me, and there's Rachel with her mask on the boat. Well, anyway, we made it to San Juan Island, and we first kind of, as we were working our way around the island, ran into 4th of July beach here. So we were walking down to the beach to have a look at things and came across a big old tree that had been blown down. And Rachel was just kind of amazed at how big the root chunk of this tree was where it had blown over. And so we joke that we've got Rachel for scale in this picture, but that is she's standing in front of is the root of a big old tree that's blown down. So a little further on down there, we wound up on the south end of San Juan Island. This is in the area of what's called the American camp, and we'll visit the British camp or the English camp in a minute. But again, you can see just how calm and peaceful the water was. It was overcast, but just a glorious day up there. So really had no complaints. There were just a few people around, but for the most part, we had a great time. We wound up in the San Juan County Park in our camp spot for the night there, for a couple of nights actually. And they've got a couple of spots here. This is kind of the one great little bay where you can kayak in to stay at this campground. So this is where you park your kayak if you're coming in. And then on the other side, they have this little day use area kind of place that's grassy, and it comes down to this spot. And so that's basically Canada, off in the distance there, Vancouver Island area. In fact, when we were here, our phones popped up and said, "Hey, welcome to Canada." But the only complaints we had with this campground was the keeping with the scary night before thing. We found this stump out in the middle of the kind of day use area. So this is just a basic tree stump, and when you're standing here looking at it up close, it just looks like a gnarled old tree stump. But as it turned out, from our camp spot up on the hill, up about straight in front of us here, in between the two little buildings, when we looked down, what we saw was what Rachel's showing us here, a scary old creepy man who was going to come and get us in the night. So she named him, she called him Leopold, and she kept teasing me about how scary the old dude was. We drove up to the north end. This is up in the English camp area. You can see how big the maple leaves are up there. And this is the English camp. So I had run into this kind of contrast before between one side of an island and the other when I first went to Hawaii on the Big Island. But this is the view of what the English dudes had for their fort or their camp up here. A beautiful protected bay, and they built this little English garden, and here's where the Americans were stuck. So, well, they weren't exactly in this spot, but you can just see the dramatic difference in the landscape here. Now, there were trees and stuff up on top of the hill, right? That section of trees up there is where they actually built their buildings, but they were definitely getting the short end of this stick because they were stuck out here. So at one point, the English were on the north, the Americans were on the south end of this island, and everything was fine until someone shot a pig. We're not sure who shot the pig, whose pig it was, but I guess as it turns out, we nearly came to war over that thing until cooler heads finally prevailed. But we had a nice little hike around through that grassy area, hiked out to the coast and had a good look again at that area. And this day was just full of blue sky and sunshine and some little strawberries or raspberries or blackberries, weren't sure what they were. The next day did bring us some fog, so through that night was when the fog rolled in, and so we think we were kind of on one of the main shipping routes out of Seattle there, because a lot of boats went by in the middle of the night blowing their foghorns every 90 seconds or whatever, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it is, and so a little tough to sleep, but it was still kind of cool to see the fog and see the change in the way the landscape looks when it's all foggy as opposed to when it's clear. It's just like a whole different place up there. Rachel was pretty excited about the rock collection there that she was finding, as she likes her geology history, and we might have brought a rock or two home. Not sure how many exactly made it into the truck, but we did bring a rock or two home of different varieties. But this was pretty much our wrap up to our time on San Juan Island. And we got up the next morning and headed back over to Friday Harbor to catch the early ferry back to Anacortes. And then we drove down south and took a short ferry across over to Port Angeles, or Port Townsend, sorry, and started our way around the peninsula. All right, well, Rachel and I are now, 4 days into our trip?
What is time?
What is time? Yes, we have no audio on any of the video that we've recorded because it's a new microphone and the setting was set wrong on the camera. But it's Tuesday, and we are in line for the ferry from Friday Harbor back over to Anacortes, and then we're going to go up to Bellingham and give away one of Rachel's books at the bookstore up there, and then we're going to see about going down and getting on the ferry to Port Townsend, I believe, which will put us out on the peninsula, and then we'll start around the peninsula. So it's been good. It's been a lot of fog in the morning, so the foghorns go on the ships, which keeps us awake, but other than that, it's been good. So we're just waiting in line, and we will probably grab a little video on the boat again going back.